Rebel Islamist fighters in Mali are in retreat, fleeing from cities after a 3-week operation by French ground troops. Jubilant crowds mobbed French President François Hollande as he visited the desert city of Timbuktu, retaken from Islamist rebels. Mr. Hollande wants to start pulling troops out by the end of March, but comparisons have inevitably been drawn with the conflict in Afghanistan. The first stage of battle might have been won, but there are fears the extremists have retreated to terrain suited to guerrilla warfare, and potentially a prolonged insurgency.
The French have had success quicker than most people expected, particularly in the main towns. There were always fears that the Islamists would try and withdraw and then regroup and try and engage the French or the Malian and African forces who are supposed to come into northern Mali in some sort of guerrilla war once they've drawn them into the towns. But it's very uncertain as to whether that will occur.
One thing that sets this conflict apart from Afghanistan is a new light footprint approach taken by Western troops.
The Western governments have been to Afghanistan. They have fought that war for 10 years or more now. They have been to Iraq in some cases as well. They have fought a conflict there. And they have seen that the sort of heavy footprint approach that puts in lots of people and lots of soldiers, that relies on sort of really sort of stamping down on a problem and then trying to fix something afterwards, isn't necessarily the way to work it. So in fact, the Western government's going in with a very different approach. It's very focused on local capacity, making links with the locals and getting them to be the ones who'll take the lead in dealing with the problems.
One of the big differences between the French invasion of Mali and the American invasion of Afghanistan is that the French had a greater advantage in the fact that they know Mali very well because of their colonial history. They know the language, they understand the culture, and for this reason it's much easier for them to operate in Mali, to be well received by the local population.
And there's less sympathy for the rebels among local people here than there was in Afghanistan too. Muslims in Mali tend to practice a more moderate form of Islam. Some Malians even greeted French troops as heroes, and most people want to see life return to normal.
Je peux faire comme mon boulot comme je vais. C'est-à-dire un client maintenant, si je le coiffe maintenant, je vais toucher son barbe, je vais lui faire une coiffure modèle. Je vais faire comme je fais, je suis libre. Je vais libre faire ce que je veux pour les clients pour que je gagne de plus. Donc vraiment, je commence aussi à écouter la musique.
But still, many Western leaders have expressed concern about the possible resurgence of Islamist extremism in North Africa.
The reason northern Mali became such a sort of ungoverned space was because you had long-standing historical tensions between the north and the south of the country, the south ruling the north, there being a lot of animosity locally about this. Tuaregs were particularly looked down on in this part of the world. So there was always this sort of rebellion brewing. And then the Al-Qaeda sort of narrative, or Al-Qaeda groups, came along with money and capacity to try to do something about this, and were able to sort of connect. Does that mean that they advance the same goals as Al-Qaeda of destroying the United States? That's unlikely.
An attack on Western interests in Africa, such as the recent siege of a gas facility in Algeria, seems more likely than an attack on the West itself. But Mali's political system remains a big concern. Politicians here are widely regarded as corrupt, and deep divisions exist in the north. Fixing the politics could be just as important as winning the war with the rebels.
It's pretty clear that the majority of Malians would like a fresh start and are pretty disgusted by the old political class, who they blame for getting them into this mess to some degree through poor governance. But given the short time frame, I mean, only a couple of months until elections, and there are still hostilities in the north, it seems pretty likely that it will have to be some sort of established political figure who leads the country forward, at least for the next term.
Malians may yearn for a fresh start, but it looks like their new leader will be from the old guard and not a young, fresh face. Any new government faces a tough task regaining the public's trust. It will also have to ensure there is reconciliation in the north, especially between Tuaregs and other ethnic groups who may blame Tuaregs for the crisis, as well as plan for greater development there to satisfy an historic sense of marginalisation. The first part of the battle against the Islamist rebels may be won, but there's a long way to go before stability is restored to Mali. Daniel Garrahan, Financial Times.